Hello, whether that's good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night. I don't know where you are in the world, but I'm here in locked down Melbourne still, with no excuse to do anything except possibly write books, which is good. My name is Alison Stuart, but I'm here today in wearing my other hat as A.M. Stuart, writer of historical mysteries. And I'm delighted to be here to talk a little bit about the second in the Harriet Gordon mystery series that's being released today. And that is, of course, the lovely Revenge in Rubies. Well, when I say lovely, I mean the cover's lovely. And I particularly like the model they've got this year. She's spot on for Harriet, I think. So the two books together are beginning to look very pretty. And I'm hoping that the third book, which is tentatively titled Evil in Emerald, will be a lovely fetching green. I apologise if I'm holding my hand out. I have a very annoying cat who I should have locked up. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about Revenge in Rubies. The actions moved on a few months from the end of Singapore Sapphire. Harriet is now working in a kind of contract capacity with the detective branch of the Straits Settlements Police. And of course, Harriet and Julian now have a ward called Will Lawson. And the month is August. And I always look in the Straits Times for that particular month as to what actually was happening. The reason I chose 1910 in Singapore is basically because nothing happened in 1910. So it's quite fun to go through the newspaper and see what the news of the day was. And the news of the day was the arrest of the infamous Hildrop Crescent murderer, Dr. Harvey Crippen, but more about that later. August in Singapore, or the particular lunar month that it is also known as the Hungry Ghost Month, which is, in Western terms, is the equivalent of our Halloween, only it kind of goes for the whole month. It's a month where you don't get married, you don't have children, you certainly don't buy new property. It's the ghosts of your ancestors coming out and wish to be appeased. I go into it a little bit in the book, but that theme actually fitted very nicely with the story about the ghosts of people's pasts coming back to haunt them. For Harriet and Robert Curran, that's certainly the case for both of them in this case. In terms of the actual theme of the story, I've chosen the military, which is a little bit more about me, I think, than many other books that I've written, because I had 20 years as an officer in the Australian Army Reserve, sat through many mess dinners, and the customs of the army haven't changed a lot in 100 years. I also drew quite a bit on my father's experience as a British Army officer. He spent some time posted to what was then Malaya in the early 1950s. So I kind of feel him pretty closely on my shoulder, because he's left me some years now. But I really enjoyed working with the totally fictional 1st Battalion of the South Sussex Regiment, and imagined them being in what in actual Singapore is known as Tanglen Barracks. I fictionalized it to become the Blenheim Barracks. And but in my mind's eye, I was seeing the Tanglen Barracks, which are still there. They were at risk of being demolished back when I was living in Singapore, but I believe they've now been preserved, and quite an enclave of restaurants and interesting shops and places to go. But they had a very long and distinguished history, so I'm glad they've been saved. So a little bit of it, I thought I would start by reading a little bit from Revenge in Rubies as my sort of happy launch day thing. I should have a Singapore sling in hand and not a glass of water, but it's probably a little early in the day even for a Singapore sling. So let me introduce you to Revenge in Rubies. Starting with chapter 1. St. Thomas House, Singapore, Friday, the 12th of August, 1910. Beneath the floor of a cellar in Hildrop Crescent, Camden Road, the mutilated and battered body of a woman which had been buried in quicklime was found. The body was that of Mrs. Cora Crippen, a music hall singer of American nationality, professionally known as Belle Elmore. Her husband, Hawley Harvey Crippen, an American dentist, is suspected to be the murderer, and a full description of him and a young Frenchwoman named Laneve, with whom he disappeared, was circulated. Harriet Gordon paused in buttering her toast. "We know all that," she said. Yes, let's get to the exciting bit, Julian and Harriet's ward Will Lawson put in. How did Inspector Drew arrest him? The Reverend Julian Edwards regarded the boy from over the top of his glasses. Stop feeding the cat under the table, Will, he said. I can see what you're doing. A slight colour stained the boy's cheek, and he picked up the spoon to crack the top of his egg without making eye contact with his guardian. Julian took a bite of his toast, shook out and refolded the morning copy of the Straits Times to continue reading the article headed Sensational Arrest on Alan Liner. He scanned the article and continued, Disguised as pilots, Inspector Drew, accompanied by 2 policemen, boarded the Montrose from a rowing boat. Crippen was walking the deck with the ship's surgeon. He exclaimed, 3 pilots are coming on board. Isn't this unusual? The doctor did not reply. Inspector Drew walked past Crippen and made sure of his man. Then he said, Crippen, I want you. A frantic rapping at the front door interrupted the dramatic account. Oh, bother, Harriet grumbled. Please see who it is, Ho-Jin. Ho-Jin cast her employer a baleful glance. She too had been listening to the gripping account of the arrest of the notorious Dr. Crippen. The household's Emma never hurried anywhere, and it seemed an age before she returned with a note in her hand. Who was at the door? Harriet asked, returning to the serious business of finishing her own rapidly cooling boiled egg. Ho-Jin shrugged and handed Harriet a sealed envelope. For you, mem. Harriet broke the seal and withdrew the single sheet of paper, embossed with The Cedars, Blenheim Road, Singapore. It's from Priscilla Nolan, she said. Julian returned to studying the newspaper. Is she the one from the tennis club? Yes, Harriet said, without looking up from the missive. I occasionally partner her in doubles. Oh, my. Julian looked up. Problem? Pris writes, My dear Harriet, come at once. There has been a tragic accident, and I would welcome your advice and the spiritual comfort of your brother, as we must see how best to break the news to Jack. Julian pushed his glasses back up his nose. Oh, dear. Do you suppose Jack's father has fallen ill or met with an accident? She doesn't say. We should go to her, Julian. She passed her brother the note, and he scanned it. The summons sounds urgent, Harry. Let me fetch my bag. I may be called upon in a professional capacity. He left the following words unspoken. Generally, a minister of religion would be called upon to administer the sacraments for the sick or dying. Will, who had been watching them with wide eyes, said, Jack Nolan's staying with Mitchell and his family at their beach villa in Canton for the month. Harriet cast her ward a sharp glance, detecting the underlying note of envy in his voice. Unfortunately for Will, no invitations to pass a few weeks at a beach villa during the long holidays had come his way, and his best friend John Simpson had sailed home to England for the break, making it a long, lonely time for the boy. Julian and Harriet had talked about a few days' sojourn at the beach before school resumed late in August, but the weeks had slipped away, and along with them, Will's hopes of a summer idyll by the sea. Julian folded the paper and rose to his feet. Ho-Jin, please can you ask Aziz to hail down a gharry for us? The Amar rolled her eyes and assumed her expression of long suffering before leaving the room, muttering to herself. Harriet and Julian exchanged amused glances. The grumbling was all pretense. Ho-Jin had proved time and again that she had a good heart and an unspoken loyalty to everyone at St. Tom's House. But only Will saw her regularly the softer side of the Amar. Chapter 2. The Cedars, Blenheim Road, Singapore. Friday, 12th of August. The Colonel's lady lay spread-eagled on her bed, almost lost in the meringue confection of white linen, lace and net, now made grotesque by the dark, reeking bloodstains that marred the pristine bedclothes. Inspector Robert Curran of the Detective Branch of the Straits Settlements Police had been a soldier and a policeman for most of his adult life, and he thought that nothing could horrify him. However, the sight of Mrs. Nolan's half-naked corpse turned his stomach. She wore a nightdress of expensive muslin, a once pretty thing, decorated with ribbons and lace. But the fight that had wrecked the room and claimed her life had seen the flimsy garment ripped almost in half. He didn't need the police surgeon, Dr. Ewan Mackenzie, to tell him that Sylvie had died from a blow to the head, several blows, rendering her the question of which one had actually killed her academic. Whoever had committed this act had hit her repeatedly and with great force, using some sort of heavy object. Steeling himself, he leaned over to examine what was left of her face. He'd never met Sylvie Nolan in life, but there had been photographs on a table in the front hall of the house, and he had taken a moment to study what looked to be a recent wedding photograph. Lieutenant Colonel Nolan, magnificent in his regimental dress uniform, and his much younger wife in silk and orange blossoms. She had been beautiful, a beauty that went beyond mere youthful prettiness. Even in the sepia tones of the photograph, Curran had been struck by the classic bone structure of the face, the perfectly proportioned nose, the large, heavy lashed eyes, the perfect complexion, and a full, sensuous mouth. Now all that loveliness had been reduced to a bloody pulp. And that's where I'll leave it. For those of you in Australia, I'm afraid Revenge in Rubies is not on general distribution, so you won't find it in bookshops, but it's certainly the big bookshops have it on online order, and you can always order it through me as well. And of course, there's an ebook and also an audiobook. I love audiobooks. And for those of you in America, if you're listening, it should be on the shelves of pretty much any shop in America that sells books, the Walmarts and the Barnes and Nobles and all the rest of it. So it won't be hard to find, and likewise ebooks and audiobooks. So thank you all for listening, and I'm sure you join me in wishing Revenge in Rubies a happy release day, and we'll look forward to part 3 of the Harriet Gordon Mysteries, Evil in Emerald. See you later. Bye.